Wharton Center audiences, and welcome to another Wharton Connection. I'm Bert Goldstein, Director of Wharton Center's Institute for Arts and Creativity. We're so glad that you are joining us for this conversation with three prominent theater directors from across the country. It's going to be a fascinating conversation, and I'm so glad that you're here. Before we begin, I do want to take a second to thank the Michigan State University Federal Credit Union for their support of these programs and support for the arts in our community. So our focus today is going to be the art of directing plays in the professional theater. And with us today are three actually prominent, unique, highly experienced theater directors from around the country, all of whom have an amazing body of work and experience. So our guest today, and you've got your names up there, but maybe just give a wave or something when I announce who you are. We have Jack Reuler, the producing artistic director and founder of the Mixed Blood Theater of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Jack, how many years have you been running Mixed Blood?
45 years.
45 years. That's an amazing track record. And from Connecticut, we have Melia Bensussen, the artistic director of the Hartford Stage. Melia, how are you?
I'm well, Jack. I've been running Hartford Stage for 18 months, so it's almost the same.
Okay.
And my colleague from the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park when I was there years ago, the former associate artistic director of the Cincinnati Playhouse, and of course, lots of regional credits and New York credits. Michael Haney, how are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
Raring to go.
Michael chiming in from Minneapolis as well. So thank you. For our audiences at home, their complete bios will be on the Wharton Center website, so you can see the tremendous body of work that they have done just by going to the Wharton website, and that will be there for you. We are also joined today by three students from the MSU Department of Theatre who will be helping me by asking some questions. We have Isa Rodriguez. Isa, how are you?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here.
Good. We have Vaughn Xavier Haynes. How are you, Vaughn?
I'm great. I am similar to Isa. I am very excited to be here.
Good. And last but not least, Harley Harris. Harley, welcome.
Hi.
Good. All right. So my first question, and I'll direct this to Michael Haney first, is what life events helped you to get where you are as a director today?
Well, I think every life event adds to who we are as a human being and as an artist. But the one I want to talk about happened early on in my career. I was just out of college. I auditioned for Arena Stage, and I got hired as an acting apprentice in their company. And it was quite a time at Arena. It was Diane Wiest was our ingenue, and Bob Prosky was there, and Zelda was there. And Zelda Fischhandler, who had started the theater and was the producing artistic director, and she was a phenomenon. But also her associate artistic director was Alan Schneider. And Alan had won the Tony for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and he brought Harold Pinter, Sam Beckett, all these great modern playwrights. He brought did the first productions of those playwrights in the United States. And he was quite an amazing man. And he really became a mentor to me. And I really learned a lot about, even though I wasn't a director then, I was an actor. I learned so much from him just being directed by him and being in the room with him. To the point where I would, when I wasn't called for rehearsal, I would come into the room and sit in the back and just watch the process. And that's how I really learned about what the real world theater was like. And I learned a lot of great things from Alan, and I also learned a lot of things I would never do. He had a little bit of a rough edge at times. But one of the things, and I remember it to this day, and I do it, he would write a simple sentence at the beginning of his script to sort of explain to himself what it was important about the play. And I remember when I got, I wrote one of his, when he was directing birthday party. He wrote in the script, it's about this guy and these two guys want to get him. That was his description of what the play was about. And when I was hired to do Christmas Carol, which was my first really Lort production at Cincinnati Playhouse, Ed Stern hired me. And I remember writing at the beginning of my script, it's about Scrooge, stupid. And that served me very well because it kept bringing me back to what the play was about. It's not about a Fezziwig party. It's about, you know, Scrooge seeing his life. So I didn't transition into becoming a director for 20 years after I worked with Alan, but I remember clear as yesterday, everything he said. And, you know, I got to work with him on Broadway. I got to tour the Soviet Union with him. We played the Moscow Art Theater in his production of Our Town, which was quite amazing. So that's the one. I hope everyone is as lucky to have somebody like that to be around and learn from.
What about you, Melia? What life event helped you to become the director you are today?
Well, the great thing about directing or a life in the theater, I think in general, is that we keep evolving. So I feel like it's almost like at this moment, I want to talk about the pandemic. I won't, I promise. But don't you feel like you're processing, you're always learning? I'm sorry I stepped away for a second, but I wanted to write down what Michael was saying. So I feel like the perennial student here and really grateful to be here with you guys. I read Alan Schneider, right? Of course, I read the books that he wrote about directing. So I really envy you that connection, Michael. I think I would link a series of experiences that had to do with just wanting to be in the room. Hamilton quote buried in there somewhere, yes. But and learning just by watching every rehearsal that I could get into. So I did an internship at Actors Theatre of Louisville many, many, many years ago. And I would, when my day was done, I would go sit in whatever rehearsal room would have me. I would watch tech from the balcony and eat my dinner in the balcony, just watching tech and trying to guess what they were working on and what they were changing. I'd go visit my parents once already lived in New York, and they lived near La Jolla Playhouse for a time, and I looked at the marquee and figured out the dates they were doing Merrily that Doug Wager was directing to tie us back to Arena. He was directing Merrily at La Jolla, which these all date me, but I figured out they were probably in preview in tech or dress, and I snuck into the theater, figuring out, sort of scoping out which doors were open, bit of a stalker, I guess, and just sat in the back row of the theater and slumped and watched. And in the middle, this figure, the sort of bearded bear-like figure, comes and slumps next to me and says, "It's better, don't you think?" And no fool I went, yeah. And that was my only interaction with Stephen Sondheim, but it was a nice moment. So I feel like for me, it's been the privilege of watching and learning from other people, and making that a lifelong habit, that we never stop mentoring and we never stop being mentored in this profession. So I think career-wise, and you asked me to be short, and I'm not being short, so
Okay.
with me. But for me, work-wise, in terms of if we're not talking craft, but just building a career, I'm half Mexican. My father's Mexican and my mother's American. And I started as a translator, translating plays for the public theater. So I got in the door early. First I was going to work box office, then I worked the phones, and then eventually thanks to the language, ended up working on a lot of bilingual work that the public theater that Joe Papp was doing in those times. He had something called Festival Latino. And that really was very grateful that I had the sort of bicultural upbringing and filter. So any of you watching, appreciate the diversity in your own background and what you can bring, that whatever lives within you that you've had to translate or code switch can be incredibly useful, since directors are translators, right? And theater people are interpreters. So that's
Thank you.
what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Melia. Jack Reuler, life event for you.
I have a different tale to tell. That I was in college as a zoology major, hoping to be a veterinarian, and I was an activist at the time, hoping that with my activism I could dilute or eliminate the various isms that plague America. And I worked for a social service agency called the Center for Community Action. And my job during the school year was seeking out needs in the community and setting up programs to meet those needs. And at a community theater nearby, there was an actor named Ernie Hudson, who went on to have a lovely career, and probably most famously as one of the original Ghostbusters, although he wouldn't call it a career highlight. And Ernie Hudson was playing the lead in a show called The Great White Hope at a community theater, and they decided it was such a hit they wanted to extend it. And he said, well, if you're going to extend it, I need to get paid, because, and this was a community theater, nobody ever gets paid. And he said, well, then I won't continue doing the show. And the point was made in Minneapolis and St. Paul that there was no opportunity for the professional theater artist of color to make a living. And it was a time when the prevailing racial politics in America was the melting pot theory. We were all supposed to create some whitewashed milquetoast American culture that we all shared in common. And my childhood icon had been Martin Luther King, who believed we needed to pay positive attention, not no attention to difference. And so I set out, based on this incident at this other community theater, to set a theater that was going to model what successful pluralism could look like, where people paid positive, not no attention to each other's differences. But it was only going to be a summer project. It was the year of the bicentennial. America celebrated its 200th birthday that year. And so I got a grant from the Bicentennial Commission. I was 22 years old. And somehow that summer project has run amok and become 45 years. And the pursuit has never been more urgent, but it was not going to be something that happened between Memorial Day and Labor Day, where we ridded America of its isms. But theater has been opened a lot of portals as a result of having started that organization, cross-sector portals within the field, and allowed me to have a voice that I would never have had I taken a different path.
Thanks. I think the common theme that I heard here for the students watching, everyone talked about early influences when they're in their early 20s, an internship, an apprenticeship, getting a foot in the door, watching rehearsals, even when they weren't called, or sneaking in when they somehow, that is really important. It, was for me too. I remember watching for 3 years at Great Lake Shakespeare Festival when I was there in the 70s, Dan Sullivan directing. That was profoundly influential to watch him work. So there's a good message there, I think, if you're a student getting into this business. So let's start off with my next question, which is, what exactly is the director's job? What's the most important thing you need to know about directing a play? Melia, you want to kick us off on that one?
Oh, wow. And we're supposed to keep the answer short. I am so challenged here, okay? I think Alan Schneider's line, it's about, is a one line. And then you go from there and make everything from the moment an audience member enters a theater to the moment they leave be about what you want it to be about, right? So that a director's job is to identify their point of view on a piece, which can sometimes be a hard thing for people, right? What is the play about to you as a director? What is the story you want to tell with this play to this audience at this moment? I think that's the first fundamental question. And then I will say I love text. I love words. I love playwrights. So I take that sense of where in the language does what does the play say to me? What does it say to an audience? And how do I make this text live, sing out in every way? What are, and thinking about what faces, what sounds. Directing a play is not unlike conducting a score, but you get to identify what kind of instruments you want, to make the music of the text. So there are the various languages a director needs to know. There's the text interpreting, there's the translating of what you're seeing in the text to your acting company, and there's also the translating of the text to your designers, to what is the world that encapsulates this story. So I think there's just, I have so many metaphors. I've taught directing for a long time, and it's always, it's so interesting to engage in the conversation of what a director does, because in some way you have to translate it into how you direct, right? I mean, I turn to Jack and to Michael. We all bring ourselves into the room, just in the same way an actor doesn't hide themselves when they're on stage. They reveal themselves through the character. As directors, we reveal our point of view through every production element. I also would just add, it's an enormously collaborative art. So I sometimes joke that the great thing about being a director is I get to take everybody's great ideas, edit them a little, shape it, and then it looks like I'm so smart. But what I'm doing in some ways is asking the right question, laying the right groundwork. When it's really working, you've asked the right questions, you've laid the right framework, and then people's contributions fit naturally into that model. So there's a kind of architecture required. See, I'm just mixing the metaphors. I could go on and on, so I'm going to shut up.
Sure.
So one of my brilliant colleagues can speak too.
Yeah, we're going to go to Jack on that one. So what do you think the director's job is, Jack?
And same thing. I was going to have an long-winded answer to that. So I just really went and made some bullets for myself that I think the director delivers the story of the play clearly and evocatively and emotionally using theatrical means, and assists the actor in framing character and relationships so that the narrative's points are made, and reveals the meaning in the text based on the author's intent and the director's response to the play. And then the director melds the visual world of the play and the intended meaning to give the audience this complete experience. But the play is central. The text provides the rules of the game. Delivering the play is a group activity in which the director is just the first among equals. But the entire production is a delivery system of the meaning of the play. You want to say, what's the story of the play? What's the meaning of the play? How can I theatricalize both? But you also want to make sure you don't direct the wrong play. So you want to say, what kind of play is it? Is it a character comedy or tragedy or farce or whatever it is? And, and just say, what is this play I'm about to begin? But I do think, as other people have said, that directing is a craft that can be learned. It's not some sort of innate art form, innate talent that one has. And those talents might be leadership or management or organization, but I don't think they're artistic. It's something that one learns. I'll just stop there. I also have a quick Alan Schneider, who I met only once in my life, but I replaced him. He was teaching at UC San Diego when he passed away, and I came in for a quarter and got to teach in his stead.
Michael, what about you? So what do you think the director's job is?
Well, I half jokingly, especially during tech, call myself the decider. Apologies to George W. Bush. But I feel like the director's at the center of, large, the nexus of all the people involved in the production, and everything that comes up, every question that comes, what color should that be? Should the dress go all the way to the floor? All of those decisions have to be made, and they're usually made by the director, but only after the director talks to everybody involved or everybody who needs to say something. It's basically what Melia said that you get all this great information from all the great people you've hired, and then you get to act like it's yours. But I also think, building on what you said, is that all the answers add up to what the play is. So every time you make an answer, make a decision, it affects the play, and it affects how it's going to look, how it feels, how clear it is, all of those things. So what your concept is really is your answers to the questions that are asked you, and there's probably thousands that get asked to a director from the time you pick the play and start having meetings and up until opening night when they kick you out.
Can I add one thing, Michael? You remind me. There's an old French movie that none of you watching have heard of called Day for Night by Truffaut, Francis Truffaut. And before there was Parks and Rec in The Office, it was a fake documentary. Okay, and it's the documentary of a filmmaker being filmed while he makes a movie, and someone says to him, "What does a director do?" And it's basically what Michael has said, but there's a great series of shots of him deciding things. Yes, no, box, yes, hat, yes, dress, no, actor, yes, site, yes, script, page, rip. But it's a lot of fun. And I guess I would also add that what's really important for you as a student of directing, I think, is to always remember to direct the play in the room, not the play in your head. Work in your context, in your moment. Forget what's the Peter Brook that he prepared? It's Bergman. You have to prepare a lot in order to leave it all behind. And you have to prepare so much so that you know your work backwards and forwards. You know what it's about and how you're going to get there. But then you get into a room and you forget your preconceptions and work with the gifts that are in front of you. Without, you can really make a mess if you keep wanting someone to be completely different than the reality in front of you.
And this is a great transition, Melia, to my next question. And I think audiences, people watching, will want to know your main collaborator, your most important collaborator, aside from the playwright, if he or she is in the room, is the actor. So what I like to know in working with actors, what is your process to create a productive rehearsal experience for them and for yourself? How do you work with actors? You mentioned, Melia, you prepare for months, then you come into the room and you go, okay, this is the reality, and they have ideas. So I'll start with Michael on the question then. What is your process of working with actors to create that positive, productive rehearsal period?
Well, one of the things I've discovered in my long career is that you don't have to know the answer to everything. Building off of what I was talking about before, there is great power in saying, I don't know, let's find out together. And I think that's what you want to do when you're working with actors. You don't want to boss them around or tell them, but you want to listen to them and their problems. And I've always thought it's important for a director to be a bit of a psychologist, because some actors need to be pushed a little bit, get them out of their safe spot. Some people need to have a safe spot created for them. So, you want to stroke them and, be kind to them and encourage them. And then some actors just need to be left alone. So you keep that in mind when you're working. But I was an actor for 20 years. So I think I know the language, I know how an actor thinks, but it's not telling them how to do it. It's giving them an image. They're going to have questions, or you say, how tell me how this character serves this play or serves this scene. so you get a conversation going with them. And I love working with actors. I think, first of all, they're brave, and most of them are very talented. And what they bring to the play, they bring their life energy, and they bring their most personal selves. And you've got to protect that. And I guess what I would say is, what I said at the beginning is that, you need to understand them. You need to find out about it. And I find as a director, if we're on a 10-minute break and there's a good conversation going on, especially early in rehearsals, I tell the stage manager, I'll call it when we're back. And sometimes we'll go 20 minutes on a 10-minute break, because they're getting to know each other. They're going to have to share their lives with each other, their most intimate parts of their souls. And they need to find out about each other and trust each other. So that's some of what, God, you could talk about this for another minute at least.
Well, we're going to give that minute. No, you can have more than a minute. Go ahead, Melia. Now that you're in another location.
Sorry about the editing. It'll be a little messy.
That's okay.
Different rooms. We're all working from home. They're doing construction on my street. We love working in the pandemic.
This is not 60 minutes. Don't worry about it.
All right. Fair enough. It's not 60 minutes. Oh, working with actors. I do feel they're my key collaborator. I think it is about really sharing what you know about the work all the way through, not infantilizing actors, but trusting them as collaborators, so that there is a lot of yes and, right? We all know from acting work, it's a lot of yes and. But then if I think the hardest thing to learn, actually, and I think it just takes, and it is craft, and it just takes time, is what instinct of an actor's is going to serve you, and where is it going to grow to not serve what your vision of the work is. And what I mean by that is you don't want to micromanage. The worst thing you can do is micromanage. And what you want, as I was saying before, is to create a structure where the actor's choices make sense. So I would say the first week, I do very little editing, if at all. Oh, interesting. Cool. Yeah. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Let me look at that. Okay. I hadn't thought of the line that way. I hadn't thought of this that way. But there's, in the middle of that first week, there's a moment where you might hear a choice that you can feel is going to go in the wrong direction ultimately. And there's no right or wrong, but there's better and weaker for what you're trying to do with a play, right? So let me give you an example. You're doing Doll's House. You're doing Ibsen's Doll's House, hypothetically. I did this a few years ago. And my vision was very much that Nora and Torvald are madly in love. They have the hots for each other. They get along great. And they have these little games. So that when she leaves, it's really a tragedy for both of them, right? And that's my take. I have all the text to support it. I have my lines to argue it. So early on, let's say the actor is making choices, either Torvald or Nora are making choices that are absolutely supported by the lines they're reading, but that are about a sort of combative, unhappy marriage. So that I might early on go, I see why that line is leading you that way. But can I point out these lines in Act 3 where she says she can't imagine living with him without sleeping with him? Can I point out to you all these other speeches? So maybe could you think about, maybe in this moment it's more playful. Maybe this is part of a romantic script these two have. Oh, and Ibsen wrote about this and this critic, blah, blah. So there's a lot of information, but it's not you're wrong. It's I see where you're going, but can I help massage this choice towards the goal that I have in my storytelling? And I share with you why. So it's not, oh, that sucked. It's an incorporating, and then sometimes they have a better argument for you back, and then go, well, I know, but maybe here I'm pissed off, and maybe that's part of this, and then in the next scene I'll do that, and you go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's better. Thank you. Let's try that. But it's a grown-up conversation. And I think as you have to own the power you have to be in charge of the room to be truly collaborative. So there's a funny tension I see in my students over the years, that there's confusion personally, internally, especially in this time that we're very aware of power structures, to not want to own a choice, to say, well, we're all going to discover this together. You can discover to a point, but you're only going to be a helpful guide if you already know, if you have some sense of where you're taking the play. I went all over the place just then, but you know what I mean. I hope there's something useful in there.
You're an Andrew Pollock painting all the time. That's good. That's good.
Good. I like that. I
Jack Reuler.
think that's a compliment. I'll think about it for a
It
while.
is a compliment. Jack, what about you?
I mean, I think that one of the great cliches about directing that actually holds to be true is that casting is 90% of directing. And I really do believe that. So if you've taken the time to do solid casting and know your play inside and out, and and sometimes, quite honestly, theaters get in the way of theater, and sometimes plays get in the way of theater and what we're creating, this piece of performance. But if you've cast it well, and I also believe that the first day of rehearsal in the director's opening statements can really guide the course for the next however many weeks you're going to be rehearsing, that the cast really understands that you understand the play, that you know it inside and out, but aren't saying here's what it is or how to do it, but rather understanding, the playwright is ultimately successful or a play is ultimately successful when the playwright's theme is revealed. And that theme is, how does that writer want you to think, feel, or behave differently after having experienced this piece of theater? And then what we do is in support of that. And so if we, at that first day of rehearsal, really present what this journey we're going to go on is successfully, and then ask a battery of questions about characters and relationships and type of play it is, so that we don't direct the wrong play and we don't try to mount the wrong play. But I think that the trust that happens on day one, when a battery of questions are asked for people that are trying to say, can I trust the person I'm opposite against? Can I trust this director? Do I understand where we're going? I really find that first day sets the course for the rest of the rehearsal period. And then I just echo what everybody else said about the yes and the trust and the letting it be a collaboration, among which the director is a decision maker, but also sometimes an affirmer.
Good. Well, I'm going to go to one more question before I turn this over to our students. And I'm going to start off with you, Jack, because you alluded to preparation, going in and preparing. And, a lot of people say that period of preparation before you walk into the rehearsal hall is important. And like you said, Melia, sometimes you prepare, then you throw all that out. But still, as Jack said, you have to know the play. You have to come in with a point of view that may change. So what are some of your, start with you, Jack, what are some of your, strategies? What do you do the months before you go into rehearsal to prepare for the production?
I really, when I get to that first day of rehearsal, I try to know more about the play than anybody in the room. And just because I've spent so much time at, what is the play you're about to begin? You say why, and then you undertake how. If there's a style to it, how you communicate that to the actors? Just the work with the design team is so important. And then, knowing, is it a play about a central character or a central relationship? And is it a rising up or a falling down or a coming apart? And then just trusting the play. And oftentimes the text doesn't need embellishment. The director wants to release the play, not obscure it. So sometimes the invisible hand of the director is important, and you want to so I try to really know the entire lighting design, the scenic design, that in my brain I could go into tech on the first day of rehearsal, and none of the decisions I ever make before the first day of the rehearsals are the ones that happen when we're in tech. But there is a vision for the show that is lights, props, sound, costumes, set, media, cast, and movement that I present to be destroyed and rethought. And so in leading everybody to where we want to go, it's by knowing it so well. So having an idea about concept and style and moments and circumstances and beats and actions and obstacles and conflict and character arcs and themes, all those things I really detail in writing before I go into rehearsal, and how much of that I share with anybody but myself it varies on show to show. But I find that time between the play you're going to do, and you need to know why you're doing that play, where you're doing it, why they've chosen to do it, really, and the first day of rehearsal is really where the lion's share of director's work for me comes in. And from then on, you're guiding a process and you're part of a process that is collaborative with a number of people in the room together all the time.
Michael, preparation.
It helps to read the play. And you need to read it as many times as you need to understand it. But if you're doing an old play that has lots written about it, you've seen maybe several times, it's a different preparation than if you're doing a new play. I find with a new play, what I love about that is you're the first one to get your grubby hands on it, and that you usually have the writer in the room with you, or you're meeting with them in doing workshops and things. And what I find, I love the relationship between a director and a playwright when it's the first time, when it's the first premiere of the show, because I will ask a lot of questions to the playwright, and what usually happens is I learn so much from what the playwright wants to convey, but usually about halfway through, a couple of days of questions, the playwright starts realizing that there's stuff in the play he didn't know was there, that he's discovering the play too. And then that's when the real wonderful work starts happening, because then it's, then it becomes a real dialogue about it. Well, how do we make that happen? What do? We start, the playwright wants to go and write new lines, but you start that process of the creation of what the play is going to end up in those early days. And there's nothing you can read the play a few times, but I like to keep my mind pretty clear when I'm working with a playwright, to just absorb and take in, I'm with the prime mover there. So, why not take advantage of it? But, other thing, I think it's good to read what other people have written about a play. If you're doing an old chestnut or doing something that's been done a lot, to read the reviews, to find out, because usually you find out where the pitfalls are, because the good critics know good drama. And you can learn a lot from that. So really, it's no holds barred. There's no such thing as stealing in the theater, or in art. You're building on something, and if you can get a head start by stepping up here to read this about it, I think that's all good. Excuse me, good stuff. And yeah.
Great. Melia, preparation, and then we'll turn it over to our students.
These are great. I will do a yes and to what both my colleagues have said here. I'm a big reader, so I love fiction. So when I'm doing a play that I set in a certain time or was written in a certain period, I find myself months ahead of time reading novels set in that time, written at that time. Some nonfiction, museum trips, just to get my head into that time and space, but a lot of reading, because in one sense, a playwright of any generation is writing one work. There's a point of, I think, there's different genres, there's different iterations, different themes, but there's a voice. So as the interpreter of that voice, I want to have all these other pieces to turn to. Shakespeare's a great example. right? If you know, we were talking, Isa, before about your production of Twelfth Night. It's really helpful to know the other romantic comedies, to understand what certain speeches are doing in certain places, because you can see it in another work. So I think, you know, I would add that. I also, because it is hard to unpack, not only for a director, but for actors, a play that has a long history, it has a lot of baggage, be it Ibsen or Shakespeare, even August Wilson. I think at this point, there's certain assumptions about how these plays are done. I try to give actors manuscript, like new scripts, not printed scripts. So I will do my own. I'm a fast typist, and I'll quite often type my own version. It's very helpful when you're making cuts in Shakespeare, because then the actors don't even get the lines you've cut. So you're sort of saving some time that way, and it makes them do their homework if they want to go back and see what 4 lines are gone. But I that's helpful for me to view every play as a new play, and I think that's why I do the typing thing with published famous plays, particularly, because that way it forces everyone in the room to view it as a new play, because it's a manuscript. So.
Great. Let's turn to our students. Isa, we'll kick it off with you. Nepotism rules. This is because you work for me. So what's your question? And are you directing it to someone specifically, or is it just for the panel?
I'll just address this to the 3 of you, whoever would like to answer. I've always been curious about what you take into consideration when you're thinking about the audience and how the audience is going to perceive certain parts of the play or certain parts of the text. Does that ever affect decisions that you make with the blocking or what you tell the actors, so that the audience perceives a certain thing? Or do you just focus more on what's happening on stage and hope that the audience will get the message you're trying to send?
Jack, you want to take that?
Well, I'm just a believer that you always play to the smartest person in the audience, that you don't try to find the lowest common denominator, but rather the highest. So if you're tackling something that takes a certain intellectual rigor to understand, you want to make sure that the person who knows everything about that knows that you've gotten it right, as well as being able to be accessible to the rest of the audience. I think that, again, knowing why the theater that's hired you has chosen this play and who their constituents are will actually change the answer to that question. The show you do, you know, in one theater for one audience might not all be the way you would do it, the same text in a different theater that has a different constituency. So I think you do consider it for sure, but I don't think it's done consistently. It's different ways for different theaters with different constituents.
Michael, what about you?
I remember I worked with Jerry Gutierrez, a wonderful director who was taken from us way too early. And he used to say, playwright writes a play, the director gets to know the play better than the playwright, the actors get to know the play better than either of them, and because they're taking it to the audience, and the audience reaction is telling them what the play is about. And I think that's a really, it's not an exact answer to your question, but I think I try to make every moment clear to me. And when I have a guest audience in, you know, when we're doing our first run through or something, the one thing I want to know is what's unclear, what's muddy, what don't you understand? Because I think it is my job to make sure that they have a fighting chance.
Good. Melia, what about you?
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's important to think about when you think about the audience, because sometimes I have dark critical voices in my head, and sometimes I imagine like the audience member who most hates the play is sitting in my head, and that's whose voice I hear. I do have the gift. First preview, I usually sit behind that person, and they hem and they haw, and sometimes they leave it intermission. And so I think first, you have to be clean about your own perspective and what story you are telling and why. And you keep seeing if that is what you see. And then as both Jack and Michael are saying, then that first preview, oh my God, I would trade a week of rehearsals for 2 extra previews, because the preview, you learn so much. And then the rehearsal after first preview is like one of my favorite rehearsals, because you have that final character, the audience, and you go, oh shit, no wonder they're laughing here and they're not there. I saw it. Finally, I saw what we were making, and I saw it clearly. And it's absolutely true. The actors then are like, yeah, let's change it, because they felt it too. So instead of it being my point of view, your point of view, we've all experienced first preview, and we're like ready to engage in a new way. So that's an incredibly productive time, those first couple of previews.
Thank you. Vaughn, your question.
Totally. So my question is, it's directed at all three of you. How would you describe your overall process of collaboration with your designers?
Good. Michael, working with designers.
I like to get together with all of the designers at some point. The main one being the set designer, I think, because it has the most effect on the play usually. And I like, we just get together, talk about the play, talk bandy ideas about, I like to know what he thinks or she thinks, and I try to convey what I'm thinking. And then I leave him alone. I say, go to it. I want to see what you think about this. And, in a couple of weeks or less, I'll get a call and we'll get together again. And, he might have some, they might have some drawings or, whatever, some even have a model built by then. And you can really get a sense of it. And then I think about it, I take it home, I look at it, I think about I read the play while looking at it, and then I go, okay, I have a lot of questions. And sometimes there are things of, why are you doing this? Maybe this won't work, but tell me why you're doing it. And so it's a process like that. It's rather like with the actors, it's being a collaborator, being a partner, being you don't have, your answers might not be the right ones. Your ideas might not be as strong. You've got to be open for, it sounds like Biden, build back better, throw yours out. What do writers say? Kill your beauties, kill your babies. Kill all the things you love and get to something that's going to work.
Jack,
so I don't know if that helps, but.
Jack, working with designers.
Yeah, no, I think that it's important that we treat designers as artists and not artisans. And all too often, directors will say, I want this and I want that and I want this. And that's really not, they are real collaborators and artists in the room who I invite to the design team, as many as want to come to auditions. Sometimes we'll sit down as a design team, as a creative team, all of us being terrible actors, and read the play and then discuss it, because it'll help us all understand what are the problems that need to be solved, what are the things that need to be revealed, what is this space and its problems we're doing it in, and really let each of those teams of people, sometimes lights and media need to talk to each other, and sometimes sound and choreographer need to talk to each other, but to let everybody's voice lead and until you solve problems and create the aesthetic that you're going to do. But I think that the mistake that too many directors come in is with an idea of how you obviously, the director needs to talk about concept and style and let the designers go from there, but they should know that they have the freedom to do what they're going to do with, and they should know their budget, quite honestly. Sometimes the theater will say to the designer, design your dream set, and then it gets hacked away because it's nowhere near affordable. And so I think people knowing their budget is also a good part of that process.
So Jack, I'm going to ask you one quick question here. You're not in a traditional theater. You're in an old pre-20th century firehouse that you've converted. Did that pose design problems for you prior to the renovation and after the renovation?
I think it poses freedoms because what we don't have, a reconfigurable space, the designer is oftentimes designing not only the scenic designer, and the design team is not just designing a play for a stage, but they're designing a room. So what is the relationship between performances and audiences? Is it a stage? Is there a stage and seats relationship? Is it more fluid? And so it certainly is a bigger job for that designer, and that designer, out of town scenic designers are very difficult in our space because it has so many idiosyncrasies. But I find it quite freeing because you get to interpret the material and create relationships between performers and each other, and performance and other designers and audiences, and where they may sit. We've had 24 different configurations of seats and stage over the years I've been there, each one of them exciting in their own way. Some of them terrible ideas, but always exciting.
Great, thanks. Harley, your question.
Yeah, so my question, it's directed to all of you guys, and I wanted to ask, what's your process for like finding and determining the different plays and productions that you want to work on specifically?
Melia, you're a current artistic director. What's that process?
I'll come to that in one sec. I just wanted to answer Vaughn's question. Since I didn't, I just wanted to add one thing. No worries. I just a bit of a trope, but it's useful. I think that we know not to give actors line readings, but we make that mistake with designers all the time. It's really Jack's point. I just want to amplify that, because when you say to a designer, I need a red couch and side tables, and you're like, what the hell? You don't. You need a place to sit where intimacy can happen, and it has to feel homey, or it has to feel hot, or it has to feel dangerous. So it's about expanding your vocabulary and to really include them as artists to do that, and to be open to, to saying we need sittables as opposed to chairs, right? Because you can sit on file cabinets, you can sit on boxes. There's a lot of different ways. Anyway, I just wanted to add that. Season selection. So Harley, do you mean for me to work on, or programming a season for theater? Because those are different, which is what I've discovered. Jack's nodding. He knows from years. For me, this is pretty new.
I think it would, I think possibly like more personally, like you, how do you determine a production you want to work on?
I get really interested in directing a play if I don't know how to do it. If when I read it, I'm scared by the craft it's going to require of me, that's when I want to do it. Either the play needs work, or I don't know how to do it. I don't see it. So it's sort of the opposite. It's not like I read it and I see it and then I have to do it. If I read it and I see it, chances are I've already done it at some point, or I've seen it work. And those are the images I have. There are of course exceptions, but that's what really draws, and an emotional connection, right? I do go, I'm a junkie for emotional fixes, and that's what got me into the theater, and I want an emotional journey. And whether joyful or sorrowful, I'm there for the ride. And so the passion in a play really speaks to me, its essence. And then if it's got problems to solve, I'm really happy. I want to be really challenged in something.
Good, thank you. Michael.
I jump on that. Melia, I like to direct things that I think I'm going to fail at, or I have no idea what's going to happen. I directed a play by David Mark Katz called The History of Invulnerability, which was the creation of Superman juxtaposed against a 12-year-old in Auschwitz. And it had 96 scenes, all in new locations. And I told the playwright, write the play you see, and no, you won't get it. But it was, you know, I wanted to see what was in his mind, and then we took it from there. And it was so challenging, and I thought it was maybe the best thing I've ever done. I had to do a play once where at the end of the play, in 3/4 thrust, the daughter takes a baseball bat and kills her father by beating him over the head. And it was like, how do you do that? And how do you prepare for that? And I talked to people, you know, fight directors and people who worked in Hollywood. How do they do those? And finally, I woke up in the middle of the night. My subconscious had been working on it. And I sat up and I went, we get a rubber bat. It's put out in the first, a real bat is put out on the bar in the first act. At intermission, we do a whole cleanup, and the prop lady just, you know, when they put the bat back up, it's rubber and placed and then the daughter wails on the father, and he falls behind the bar, and then she's going up and down like this, and then she comes up with a real bat dripping blood and flips it over the bar, and then it hits, and it totally sold it. And you know, we had been thinking, well, maybe we have to get this, and we have to get this, and we have to get, and it just I trust my subconscious a lot. I get a lot of good ideas in the middle of the night, and half of them never see the light of day. But yeah.
Jack, how do you answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think just echoing what we said a minute ago, I think we as artistic directors find our value in curating a mission and a vision for an organization, and then identifying programming that supports that mission and vision. So once you know you've done that, then as an artistic director, I get to decide to hire myself to do the ones that speak to me the most. And I would say I like an original piece in which I get to work with the writer. I like comedy. I like shows with a lot of tech. I like non-conventional spaces. I like shows that are political and emotional. I like shows that have a call to action, that the content of the play inserts itself into some social equation such that that social equation can no longer be solved without employing theater as a means of resolution. And those are but I also ape that idea that those that scare me the most, those that I don't see how to do, are the ones I want to do the most.
I'm going to ask one last question, and we have exactly 3 minutes left, so you each get a minute to answer the question, which is an obvious question, but I think it's a good one. I think you've touched on it a little bit. We'll have students watching this. We have students here. You want to be a director. You're 21 years old. What's your line of advice to them? Michael Haney.
Well, Alan Schneider said to every young director he ever talked to is start your own theater. Then you get to work. If you can't do that, try to become somebody's assistant, or at least see if every theater that you have access to, see if you can be an assistant on a show. But start doing it, and be proactive, and don't wait for somebody to come to you to hire you, and see shows. Keep up with the literature, keep up with the writing, read new plays if you can't get to see them, and just prepare ye the way to be a director.
Melia, you've done a lot of teaching, you've worked with a lot of students. What do you tell them?
Read at least one play a week. I don't care what play, I don't care what it is, I don't care how short or how long, but you want to be prepared to get lucky. So you never know when you're going to have, you have to set up these opportunities, as Michael has said, But when someone says to you, what kind of writing do you like? What's a dream project? What would you like to direct? Or you see an empty rehearsal hall at your school that someone's not, well, everyone's on this machine, but you wanna have the resources. So yeah, and I used to go into libraries before there was, on the internet, and I would find the call number and I would just pull books off the play shelf, right? I think it's 721, I think is the Dewey Decimal number for plays. And I would just go to those and just, do I know this? Do I know that? And then if you're listening to an interview with a playwright or a director or an actor, and they mention a name you don't know, you look it up. Information. Preparing for a career is not unlike preparing to direct a play. It's use your art on your life as well as on your work. Pay attention and be prepared.
Great. Jack Reuler.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the last word, Jack.
there's a broken treadmill in New York where you direct readings and workshops and you assist famous people, and that's how you get a career in the theater. Ignore that, dismiss it. Don't do it that way. I completely follow that idea of direct, and direct. So if it's a high school production, community theater production, professional production, align yourselves with playwrights who might say, if you're going to do my play, I want this person to be the director. Really, being any freelance anything is a full-time job, and you need to have a product, which is your talent, and marketing and research, and do all those things and have a website and let people know how good you are, what you do. And just you have to work full-time at being a freelance anything. But if you keep directing, you will get to be a better director. If you see a lot of theater, you'll get to be a better director. And again, if you read a lot of plays, you'll get to be a better director.
And on that note, I thank you all so much for your time, your wisdom, your experience. Jack Reuler, Mixed Blood Theater, Minneapolis, Melia, Bensussen, Hartford Stage, Michael Haney, freelancer, now working as a freelance director. Isa Rodriguez, thank you. Vaughn, Xavier Haynes, thank you. Harley Harris, thank you also for your input. I wish you all continued success, new adventures. Please stay healthy. And once again, on behalf of the Wharton Center for the Performing Arts, we're so glad that you've shared this time with us. We do appreciate it. And take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really been a pleasure.
Thank you all for joining us. Our next Wharton Connection, I will be talking to 4 very different choreographers about the work of choreography. So there are 4 different choreographers from around the country who will be joining in on a very similar conversation that you heard today about their work. And I hope you can join us then. In the meantime, visit the Wharton Center website to keep posted on all of our virtual programming and what we're doing during the shutdown to keep you connected with Wharton Center. Thank you all and stay safe.